Hello, and welcome to the Producers Guild conversation with the creative team behind The Good Fight. We'd like to thank our friends at CBS All Access and MRCPR for making this event possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Cynthia Littleton. Cynthia is co-editor-in-chief of Variety. She has covered the television beat for more than 20 years. She began her career at United Press International, followed by stints at Broadcasting and Cable Magazine, Variety, and The Hollywood Reporter, where she rose to editor before rejoining Variety in 2007. Littleton is the author of TV on Strike: Why Hollywood Went to War Over the Internet, the definitive account of the 2007 through 2008 Writers Guild of America strike, and the impact of the disruptive digital advancements that fueled the labor strife. Welcome, Cynthia. Welcome, panelists. And please, Cynthia, take it away.
Thanks so much, Kyle. And thanks everyone for joining us. It did not take me 2 seconds to say yes to do this when I was approached by the PGA to have a conversation with the lovely and talented Michelle and Robert King, co-creators, executive producers, and showrunners extraordinaire of The Good Fight. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a real treat to get to pick your brain about the upcoming season of the show.
Thank you, Cynthia.
It's great to see you, Cynthia.
We're going to talk about season 4, and we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts of producing at this crazy time for the world. But on behalf of Good Fight fanatics everywhere, I would be remiss if I didn't just press you a little bit. As I understand, you're kind of just in the last week or two back in the writer's room.
No, for a while now.
About a month and a half. We were in December, but we're prep started on the first episode last Monday. So we're 3 weeks under prep.
All right, gotcha. Then you have no excuses. Tell us, give the fans, I know you will not give away huge plot points, of course, we know better, but give us a broad sense of what are the, there's only been a few things going on in democracy and in the world for the last, almost 9 months since you were last up. Give us some sense of what you're thinking, where those creative juices are flowing, storyline-wise.
Here's what I think we can say. The audience will find out what our characters have been doing during their pandemic.
And I would say the room has been very influenced by January 6th, and kind of on a more thematic level, a split that's developing with the country, but seeing how it's applied to the law. Will there be a bifurcation of two types of law, a law that is accepted by some parts of America and a law that is accepted by others? And is that a way, I think the law is often thought of as law shows like LA Law or The Practice, but in many ways, it's so much of the guardrails of society over the last 4 and 5 years have been the law, to see how it itself can be eaten away by this sense there's two Americas. And it's not the America necessarily the poor and the rich. That was last season. It's now, this is the America of what you might consider the people are kind of in the revolutionaries for whatever the next thing is, which could be Occupy Wall Street, it could be the insurrectionists, and then the America that is thought of as something that we've lived with for a lot of years, and we want to retain that. So that's a long-winded answer to say we've found creative and we think comic ways to pursue what are purely very challenging thoughts.
Michelle, anything you want to add?
No, just that it's the traditionalists versus the anti-traditionalists, and traditionalists is probably polite.
And I think you'd find that with GameStop too. It's nothing like the insurrection, but there is a sense that the way things have have to change, and the way to attack that is through the law.
And if you're looking at the GameStop thing, is there fun to be had? Is there fun to be had in tearing down the norms?
Good Fight from the get-go of this series, you have captured that two Americas, the great division. And I was absolutely thinking about how, how Diane Lockhart and co would handle what we've seen, I think, for a lot of people in the last, especially like the last, 4 or 5 months, is this, wholly separate worlds, separate facts, separate sources of information,
Yes.
separate beliefs in what the Constitution says. I mean, the law itself, which we have, I think is a lot of us as Americans had seen the Supreme Court, the law is above the petty partisan bickering. No more. We are in it. Everybody, the mud is at the door of the Supreme Court. These last extraordinary, incredible couple of weeks, you could kind of look at them two ways. The law, the Republic did hold the laws, the norms, the protections, the checks and balances.
Well, can we add to that a lot of the Republican or Trump appointed judges held on,
Right.
that they understood that 63 lawsuits were brought by sometimes by nuts about overturning the election, and they were turned back. So again, no matter what political stripe you are, there is hope in seeing an agreement of what the laws mean.
And yet, if you're of a pessimistic bent, the very fact that we're having these conversations is horrifying. That you have to say, oh, the Republic held, yay. I mean, that was not a conversation any of us were having
But if it made
10 years ago.
If it made people who were never patriotic because they thought, oh, I'd rather be in Sweden or, Scandinavia, and don't they have a better healthcare system? If they have to think about patriotism and what does it mean to kind of play with this project of America, all the better. Sorry, we interrupted.
The strain that we saw on January 6th, that was that extreme, just extremist strain, reflecting that in the culture. Is that something you obviously have, especially with, you tackled a lot of online extremism and a lot of the challenges of that are wrought by social media, but will you reflect, do you think you will reflect the events of January 6th in season 5?
Thematically, perhaps more than literally.
Yeah, and I would say one of the things you want to be every time you start the year is optimistic and hopeful. Mm-hmm. And, I think one of the episodes is purely about the Section 230 section of the internet law. And is that, is there any way to knock out one problem and you knock out 50 or 2,000 or 1.5 million problems by just knocking out one thing? So I think part of this year is trying to figure out not just what are the questions of this next 4 years, but kind of what would you consider the solutions? And I do think there's an attempt to embrace, thoughts about how to move on, which is weird for a show that has been so much about how to deal psychologically with the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and of course, as the depth of the belief in conspiracy theories kind of bubbled up to the surface, of course, I couldn't stop thinking about season 4, Memo 618. I mean, and I was truly like, as the events of the election and aftermath went down, I was truly thinking like, this is going to be such a grist for you. But as you were seeing the rise, the writ large of the QAnon, I mean, were you thinking about some of the themes? You tackled them in a different way, but you were hitting on the pulse, the currents of what, of what steamrolled at the end of the year and in last month. It's incredible. You've had such a knack with doing it on the show.
Sorry.
And I would say either fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you want to think of it, it's not gone away in season 5. I mean, these issues are still with us.
It's the difficulty for us is the room thinks about thematically what's going on in the culture, but then in many ways, what can make us laugh talking about it? Because the show would be really dry and a high school civics lesson unless it had found the comic bent underneath. And there is, unfortunately, comedy in what we're looking at going on both now, but in the last 2 months. It's a really dark comedy, but I think that is probably a good way to not be bored or find what we're going through right now dry, because it is incredibly serious, but sometimes the best way to deal with the most serious thing is comically.
And just for our viewers that may not remember or be aware, Memo 618 was a thread in last season that was almost like a secret get out of jail free card that the rich had, which tapped into the themes of, you know, there's two countries, there's secret cabals of rich people that have special rights. And, you know, at times when you look at how justice is done in this country, it's hard not to think that there might be
we were looking for something like Catch-22 that was, you know, a purely fictional device. In fact, the number is just our daughter's birthday. So a device 618 that would seem like, okay, this was a memo sent out by people who are rich to other people who are rich saying, hey, this is one of the good guys, let them off, you know, and then came with some force behind it. This is one of the good guys, let them off, or we're going to accuse you of bribery, Your Honor. You know, that seemed to be a way, and it came out of the idea that it felt like we always felt like in the past with Watergate and everything, people had to honor subpoenas, and there was suddenly this sense in modern days, like, yeah, we're not going to follow, we're not going to go in.
It's an invitation,
it's an
suggestion.
Yeah, and it felt like, wait, what? The force of the law doesn't mean a subpoena. I mean, if I get a subpoena, I can't throw it away like a jury summons. It's a subpoena. You have to go in. But it felt like there was this sense, like some of the friends of the current administration or that administration could say, yeah, we don't want to do that because it's political. It's like, okay, well then what do we have? What is our legal system if you can just do that left and right? So that's Memo 618 came out of that sense. Some people seem to have a pass, which I don't feel I have.
No, it's if one is connected, there are no consequences.
Speaking of consequences, I know you had, after season 4's incredible finale, talk about finding funny in something that's not funny, but you found it a way to really capture, I think, a moment of absurdity and a sadness, but absurdity in the culture. And you had an exchange with Mr. Alan Dershowitz that I wrote about. Can you talk at all about how that was wrapped up? He took exception to some of the characterization of him as discussed by the characters in that fantastic finale.
We did decide to do an episode about Jeffrey Epstein and also there were a lot of like conspiracy theories on the left and the right about whether he was murdered or committed suicide, which is the official report. And the deeper we had, because our writers' room is a lot about research. We spend, weeks researching, but they came in and gave a presentation of what would have had to go wrong that night for him to be left alone in his cell to commit suicide. And it was like, whoa, I can understand how conspiracy theories come about. So that sent us down this long, distant rabbit hole of not only Epstein, but Alan Dershowitz as his lawyer, and Alan Dershowitz as someone who had a massage in Epstein's mansion, but didn't take off his clothes. And it was an older woman named Helga. And it just was like, every time where you turn, there was this comedy about these enablers of Epstein. And, we believe in law. We believe everybody deserves a defense. But there was also this comedy of the scientists, of, the people who went to his island, a lot of Harvard, a lot of, it wasn't just Dershowitz, but we had a lawyer who hated Dershowitz on the show, a fictional lawyer, who was fired by Epstein because he went to Dershowitz. And he said some nasty things about Dershowitz, which were in this lawyer's mouth. And that felt funny to us because you could have that person say it. And I'm sure it's what a lot of people think, but it was funny to have a fictional character say it. And that it was. And
he couched it in terms of, I am just
stating my opinion.
Yes,
and
this is not a fact, and I can't be sued for it.
Yeah, and so then it was funny that Dershowitz.
You did your homework.
We did our.
Or the legal department did their homework.
And our 11 years of doing the shows has taught us. And then, Dershowitz obviously took offense because the character, not us, but the character called him a shyster and awful other stuff, which they didn't take offense to, but they took offense to shyster. And his lawyer, Dershowitz's lawyer, sued the show. What was lovely about CBS is we felt they took it both a combination of seriously and comically in the way we would have hoped, and resisted any lawsuit because, come on, I'm sorry, it's a fictional show. It's a fictional character on the show saying fictional things about, yes, a real lawyer, but a real lawyer who did in fact represent Epstein and did in fact get a massage at his mansion and did in fact say that he wore his clothes. So all the things said were either truthful and in the record, said by Dershowitz himself on record, or were fictional because they were an opinion, they were in a fictional character's mouth. So it was, what we were thinking of doing this year was titling all the episodes, Alan Dershowitz meets the Frankenstein or something, have each title be Alan Dershowitz somewhere in the name. We'll see whether we even get away with that, but it makes us laugh that each title comes with Alan Dershowitz somewhere in it.
That's funny. Let's talk about kind of the practical nature of work right now. How I'm guessing, are your writers together in a room, or are you working virtually?
We're over Zoom virtually, and you've hit on it essentially, which is you're talking about that Epstein episode as the season finale. In fact, it was season 7. It was never, episode 7.
Right.
It was never meant to be the season finale, but we were filming it
right
in March when things became so dicey with the pandemic that we had to end filming.
So we've been doing
about 3 episodes early than you planned, right?
That was correct.
So now I'm guessing that so much time has passed that are you gonna revive any of the plans for those final 3 episodes, or are you starting fresh?
The world changed so much.
Yeah, no, we've begun anew, so it'll be all fresh.
How is the working environment? How's the brainstorming process online versus being huddled in a small room with snacks like God intended?
Exactly. Here's our great good fortune is that this room has been together a long time. This is, as you say, season 5. Most of these writers, everyone has come back from the prior year, and most from years before that. So everyone knows each other well. So that does make it easier on Zoom. I will say, because now this is our 3rd Zoom room. We also did Evil and Plan Z on over Zoom. Because on Good Fight, so much comes from just talking about what's happening current day. It's a little harder. If you are simply focused on story building, it's easier.
And I would say this, we discovered one thing about a week or 2 into this room, which is there was a school monitor quality to the fact that I was calling on names. Everybody raised their hand. And we just basically took everybody off mute. And everybody can start talking, because you get a little closer to conversation if people are slightly interrupting each other and not just giving speeches, which is part of the problem of being on mute. Everybody needs to take advantage of their time unmuted. So it creates a little more chaos, but I think it's a little closer to natural speech.
I will say, I think that the results are just as good, that the scripts are just as good. And now I'm speaking from other rooms because we're just getting rolling on this one. But it's not necessarily as fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. You miss, certainly, yeah. I was going to ask you if you felt like the pace was about the same of work. I realize you're still fairly early in the process, right?
I would say the pace is faster because we only do it 3.5 hours a day. When in the writer's room, when people came in, it was usually 10 to 6, right? 10 to 6, mm-hmm. right? With the 1 hour lunch. Now we do 3.5 hours with a half-hour break.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that, writers are people too? Or are you finding that your staff, that just the events, the heaviness of the world of the last, 9, 10, 12 months, like the heaviness, is it weighing on your folks more than it did, say, when you were putting season 4 together? Do you sense a change in the mood?
I would say it's different now. In some ways, I think this is a moment where people are doing better emotionally. We had a different room going on in the spring when George Floyd was killed. And that was very difficult on everyone and hard to be apart. And then there were, fireworks going off, keeping people up all night on top of everything else. So
felt like people wanted to come in and talk about things. We were in the midst of the room when the insurrection happened on the Capitol. And so we all took a break. So, I mean, we could see whether our country was in danger, so we took a break from the room, but I think everybody just wanted to talk. So those days we would start the day with like an hour and a half, like what the fuck session.
Right.
And what does that mean? And what do we think it means?
And there's that's one thing your writers can do is get together and talk.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's such a smart, well-informed group that are actually collegial and fond of each other. So it's a good group therapy session. It's the people you actually want to be talking to when something catastrophic is happening.
And we should say a lot of the episodes, or some of the episodes, don't even, we're doing one now on comedy, and cancel culture's its effect on comedy. And so that is a good distraction, even to be talking what everybody's different attitude towards what satire should be, parody versus comedy, SNL bullshit or something else,
You two have been so busy the last couple of years between, Good Fight at an incredibly high level, Your Honor, Evil, Brain Dead. I know other projects that have probably escaped my mind. How do you balance? What would you say is the challenge of balancing when you have multiple projects going in various stages at any time, and projects where your level of involvement is, I'm guessing deeper on Good Fight than it is maybe on some other things where you are working with other showrunners. How do you balance your time and what it is that you need to contribute to each project, given the different?
Well, the one we were probably least involved, because the other ones we're actively show running, is Your Honor, only because Liz Glotzer, who's our production head, has been amazing about that and was down in New Orleans for the whole length of it and was dealing with all the COVID break between, because we broke during, I guess it would have been the 8th episode. I would say we split up duties there. Michelle does pre-production, script writing, and everything. She's basically in the room a lot of the time, dealing a lot with that. And I probably have more involvement with post-production because I like editorial. And I think we were as much as possible involved with looking at cuts, giving notes on cuts, and talking with Peter Moffat,
who's running it.
So I would say it's obviously much, much less than when we're actively show running. But there still is a strong producerial element because these are complicated shows that then happen in the middle of pandemic. So there was more time to do editorial, oddly and ironically. There was, more engagement in editorial than maybe usual when you're under the gun. But I would say that is the way we split that up. With regards to the other shows, we overcommitted this year and not intentionally.
Yeah.
It just, we wrote a show thinking there would be a second wave that would knock out production. We wanted to do it if everything else went down. And then we just ended up doing it, even though not everything else went down, because we're shooting New York. So we didn't get the shutdowns in January on Evil and Good Fight. And then second wave, they wanted to have happen. So, it was bad planning on our part, and we would not do it again.
And remind me, what is that show? What is the other show that you did in that time?
It's called Plan Z. It was originally called The Second Wave. And it's 6 episodes. It's going to be on Charter Spectrum, and it's satirizing the pandemic, but in the guise of a zombie show.
And it's Audra McDonald and Taylor Schilling. So what's fun about that, it was a show that, because we've been watching some of these Zoom shows and just going to sleep watching them. So what we thought is the best way to do a Zoom show and keep people from falling asleep is to engage with genre. And we love the zombie genre. And the zombie genre seems like a very good metaphor for, what's going on today and what went on over the summer. It seems we're all in our little spaces, our barricaded spaces. And then unlike the zombie genre, there are a lot of people who are denying it. You can't deny a zombie genre, because if you deny it and say, I'm not getting vaccinated or wear, go out with signs, zombies don't care, they'll just eat you. So, I mean, that is the big difference.
I love it when you play with allegory. I know you said you were oversubscribed, but my sense is that you two like being busy. You like juggling a lot.
I think we do.
We say we don't, but
for better or worse. We got a little bit maybe too far in the red, but we're getting through it. And
it's like that song, Life is Good. We can't complain, but sometimes we still do.
Yeah.
Do you, talking about, of course, pandemic impact, and when you get people now in a group of people in front of cameras, there's a lot of layers. You guys have been at this a long time, but I'm guessing you've never felt the same kind of pressure for like the public health aspect of the job that you do. Can you talk about what kind of burden that puts on producers? Where the buck stops with the showrunner or the producer on the set?
It's huge. And one of the things is the showrunner shouldn't be the producer on the set. I mean, typically we would be there all the time, but now it's really not a kindness, nor is it safe to be an additional breather on the set. So you are forced to make your visits very infrequently and do it, via Zoom, which is not our typical way of working.
But if I could say this, Michelle was very involved on the early part of this before the unions came in saying what they thought the rules should be. Because there did seem to be a sense that maybe if it was left to certain people that wanted just to start a production, there would be a real light sense of the rules. So we feel everything ended up in a great place because of the prevalence of testing. We're tested 3 days a week. The actors, everybody in the A zone is tested 3 days a week. And actually, the system kind of held, just like the guardrails to our government held last year, despite all our worrisome expectations. I think the same thing was we had worrisome expectations of how the show would work. I actually think it's working. I mean, look, if you're optimistic about Hollywood, you'll always be thwarted and ridiculed. But I am kind of surprised by how smartly this has been played out, which I guess if you have a lot of people with a lot of money who want things to work, they will make it work. But I do think in practice, when we've had either a false positive or a positive, there has been a way to isolate it and not infect the rest in a very smart, clever way. And, one of our reasons to want to do Second Wave, which turned in Plan Z, was we wanted to get all these Broadway actors back to work, because God knows when Broadway is coming back. And so it did seem to be a way that people could get healthcare and work, and our crew could work. The people were suffering and you want to be kept busy, and you also need the money and you need the healthcare. So I've been very pleased with the way everybody worked together on this, because it could have been a stupid.
Yeah, and the line producers have been heroes.
For us.
Yeah, Kristen Bernstein, whom we work with on Evil, and Brooke Kennedy on Good Fight. I mean, they've really taken this very seriously, which is the only way it can work.
It sounds like a whole other full-time job for people that are already juggling.
And full-time job for someone that actually cares about the crew and the cast. These are not anonymous folks. You know them, their families. It's critically important that they remain healthy and that they have a way to earn a living.
Plus, also, like last season, Good Fight crew expected to do all 10 episodes. And then when we only ended up doing 7. So it was that part of it too. And again, these are people we've been with for 11 years. I mean, these people who met at your Christmas parties and now are married and have 3 kids,
Right, between Good Wife and Good Fight season. Yeah. Has the cost of all of this, the testing, the PPE, has the cost crept into, as it squeezed, other parts of your budget?
It, in theory, is these items are to the side. But here's the reality. Things that are not considered COVID costs
Right.
are in fact COVID costs. If, for example, you can't film on the streets of New York because there's a pandemic, then you're going to have to do more on stage. Then you're going to have to build sets that you don't have. Well, is set building considered a COVID cost? No.
Right.
But would you be doing this if it weren't a pandemic? No, you wouldn't.
And one of the worst is the lack of tandem crews.
Yeah.
Because we do overlapping schedules usually because they're, even though you might have 9 to 10 days scheduled per episode, you need that 11th day. Normally you do a tandem crew, so you'd have one shooting on the set while one is on the street. But with our attempt to limit the number of people connecting with the crew, the cast who is unmasked, you do only one. So again, that's not considered COVID cost. So the simple answer is yes, it's more expensive. We're trying to pull back as much as possible. It's very hard on shows. We've been trying to do more visual effects, to work with green screen more, etc.
And fewer background actors. Again, just to limit the number of people, limit the number of exposures.
You've done very creative things with animation in the past. Do you think we might see more given the conditions?
Yes.
There's a bit of animation sprinkled throughout.
We like playing with the form as much as possible, but I think you have more reason to play with the form when you're working through a pandemic.
Yeah, necessity being the mother.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
The first show of Evil was supposed to take place in a haunted subway station, and we, of course we're not going to do that. How we even explored how we do that green screen, it just was stupid. So then we moved it inside and used our cast more, which was really good. Again,
changed the episode completely.
Yeah, we rewrote and rethought it.
It sounds like you have to be, especially as showrunners, you have to just be maximum flexible and open to
more than ever before, because typically you have schedules you can rely on. Schedules are almost as fictional as the stories that we're filming at this point.
And the other thing is
that's got to be a huge challenge if you can't plan that.
It is because shows get shut down continuously. I think half the shows being made last week were shut down.
And then you have people flying in, or you hope to fly in from LA, and you never know how the LA protocol will be with us. Or even we have someone coming from Australia, and she was on one of the last flights out. It was like the fall of Saigon because they were closing down because they had one infection in Perth. So you keep running into situations like that, and now it's with London. Anyway.
You think you know what to worry about, and then inevitably there's some new problem that it hadn't even occurred to you to worry about.
Well, in the role of producers, you have to juggle all things and be, an expert on a lot of, have a little expertise on a lot of things. So it's been wonderful talking. This has so whetted my appetite. Do you have any idea when we'll see season 5 of Good Fight? Will it be, it'll probably be a few months yet.
Yeah, my guess is around April. I'm just basing it on how we're shooting. My guess is April.
All right.
Whenever CBS comes in behind us, then no.
Next week. We think it'll be.
Actually, I do want to ask you, it occurred to me that you are coming up on season 5 of Good Fight. Good Wife went 7 seasons. Not that there has to be symmetry, but are you thinking at all, have you thought at all about pacing in terms of the story? Do you feel like
I have a feeling it all comes down to Christine Baranski and Audra McDonald and how long they want to work on it. As you know, Christine's on the Gilded Age this year, but she's very excited. As is Audra, you're right. So I have a feeling, first of all, the show found a lot of its anger and passion through the Trump years. I think everybody will see how this year plays. We feel excited about it, but we were excited about Brain Dead. No one saw that. So, you never know whether the show has overstayed its welcome just because the zeitgeist changed. I don't think it will, but
My money's on you two and Christine and the rest of your crew. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's really good talking to you.
Always good to see you, Cynthia.
Take care, you two. Bye-bye.